Welcome to Interludes with Chris Mackenzie. And today I have a very, very special person in the studio. They're all special people who come into Interludes, but for me, it's a particular treat and a joy to have John Lanchbery, who is a well-known composer and conductor. John, thank you so much for making the time and the effort to come into Golden Days Radio.
Christine, thank you very much for asking me.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more and more. Tell me, this is an incredible life you have led.
Yes, it is, and it's a long one too. Yes, I only gave up a year and a half ago, which I had to because of illness, but I was working it out. I'd been earning a living as a conductor for 52 and a half years, so I reckon I've done my dash.
Good grief, that long. And where did it all start? Tell us.
Well, it all started way back in London, just after the war. I'd come out of the army and I'd gone back to the Royal Academy of Music, where I had a scholarship, and earning extra money because I couldn't live on the government grant. I was printing music for a Russian firm, the Anglo-Soviet Music Press, and also working in a school where I'd been conducting a rather difficult modern Soviet-Russian piano concerto. And the boss of the music publishing company, I think, must have come to hear the performance, because he sent for me one day. I went into his office thinking he was going to ask, what have I just been printing? And he said, have I ever heard of the Metropolitan Ballet? No, I said. Well, you should have, he said. The artistic director is a good friend of mine, and they are looking for a new conductor. And I tell them I think I've found one for them. And I said, really? Yes, he said, I mean you. This is the man's name and telephone number. Go and see him. So I went to see this man who was he was a white Russian, had a wonderful camel hair coat over his shoulders, lived in a smart flat in Chelsea, Russian cigarettes, and he said to me, when is your birthday? And I said, it's the 15th of May, 1923. And he said, but that's it. You're Taurus and Venus. You're exactly what we want. I will arrange for you to see the lady who owns this ballet company. Now, this was a privately owned ballet company in 1948. This woman was mad about ballet. Her husband was a successful solicitor, and he indulged her in running this company, which of course was losing money. You cannot make money running a ballet company. Incidentally, you've had one of its dancers on your programs, because you've had Harry Haythorne
Of course,
on
yes.
the program, and
Yes.
Harry was in the corps de ballet. He joined the following year, joined in 49. Anyway, the deal was that I should be tried out as conductor. Now, they were a little worried because I'd never conducted anything professionally. I'd only conducted as an amateur, as in fact an assistant schoolmaster. And so they thought, for safety's sake, they would hire a pit where I could take the orchestral rehearsal, the first orchestral rehearsal, so that they could watch me and see if I was any good at all. And then the deal was that if I seemed to be able to take the rehearsal, they would pay me £20 for the first week. This was going to be a 16-week tour. Mm-hmm. First week was the Lyceum Theatre, Edinburgh. Yeah. They would pay me £20 and my ticket up to Edinburgh, of course. Ah. And at the end of the week, they would pay me £20. And if I was no damn good, they give me a ticket back to London with the £20. And if I was good, then they'd take me on as music director. So on the Friday, Treasury Day, I went in for Treasury, and I said, do I get a ticket back to London? No, you're staying with us. So that's how I knew I had the job, and I stayed with that company for the last 2 years of its life. It eventually died through lack of money. But during those 2 years, I learned a hell of a lot about conducting for ballet, about how good I thought I was and how good I really was. But on the other hand, I did try and learn. And it was a very, very valuable experience for me. We weren't in work the whole time. There were gradually more and more weeks out. Occasionally we were working for half salary, things like that. But it was wonderful. It was a gypsy life, and I was learning so much about conducting because I was the only conductor. I was doing 8 shows a week, plus there was only one rehearsal pianist. I had to help out with the rehearsal playing as well on the piano as best I could, and I've never been a good pianist. But damn it all, I was 24, and I thought, who cares about the Royal Academy of Music? I'm afraid I left that in the lurch, gave up my scholarship, and I became a professional musician.
How marvellous. What an incredibly wonderful break so early in your career, too.
Absolutely.
And very encouraging.
Yes.
So you continued on.
That's right.
What happened when you left them?
Well,
They left you.
Yes, eventually the company just packed up through lack of money, and I must admit for a few months I had a very, very lean time. I was taking whatever I could get, and I reckon since I've done every branch of conducting except actual circus. I'm sorry, I've never done circus, but I did a week of old-time variety. I did a pantomime, for which also I had the great joy of writing the incidental music, because I was really, at the Academy of Music, I was really a composition scholar, first and foremost, and conducting was my number 2 string, but I was first and foremost supposedly a composer. So I had great fun writing the incidental music for the pantomime and conducting All I Want for Christmas Is My 2 Front Teeth for the dame and so on. And then weeks and weeks of near starvation. I'd been employing a cellist in my orchestra with the ballet, and he had a very, very soft-hearted wife who ran a boarding house, and for some weeks and weeks and weeks I was running up a terrible debt. Eventually work started to come my way. I had written a couple of ballets for this ballet company, and they'd been televised by the BBC.
Yeah.
And in those days, 1949, 1950, everything that was televised on the BBC was conducted by one man who had talked the BBC into thinking that conducting for television was a very special, arcane art. His name was Eric Robinson. His better-known brother was Stanford Robinson, by the way.
Yes.
And Eric conducted these 2 ballets. Now, he didn't know a thing about conducting for ballet, and I had the job of sitting near the monitor where he could see me and no one else could, and I had to hold up my right hand if he was too fast, my left hand if he was too slow, and hold nothing up if he was okay. And like that, he conducted those 2 ballets that I'd written the music for.
Good grief.
Believe it or not, yes.
Now listen, can we have, I think we're going to have some music now. It's going to be from the finale from The Merry Widow.
Well, we're looking on many, many, many years, because by the time Merry Widow came along, I'd been in several companies, several prestigious companies, and I'd found myself the music director of the Australian Ballet, where in 1975 a choreographer had the bright idea of turning The Merry Widow into a ballet, and this is some of the music from it.
was the finale of The Merry Widow, played by the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra with our guest John Lanchbery conducting. Beautiful. Wonderful. Tell me now, just before that music, you were talking about the fact that you ended up by came to Australia for the first time. What brought you to Australia?
Well, I'd been to Australia, first of all, because I'd eventually joined the Sadler's Wells Theatre Ballet, and they were engaged to do a long tour of Australia. So my first view of Australia was actually 1958-59, when I did this long tour. Then I was promoted to the company at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, and I was there for some years and only left when they sacked their absolutely wonderful artistic director, Frederick Ashton. Read the book, yes, I'm in the middle of writing a book about it all. Yeah.
Oh, are you?
And,
right.
Yeah, and it was such a terrible blow and also, the other thing is this, I'd got to know Nureyev, of course, because he'd been a guest with the Covent Garden Company, and Nureyev had asked for me to be released for 3 months from Covent Garden to do a tour of America with the Australian Ballet, doing his production of Don Quixote.
Yes.
And I got free to do that. And I absolutely fell in love with this company. I mean, here was I leaving temporarily a gloomy company because they'd lost their wonderful artistic director. And here was this young Australian company, and they were enormous fun to be work with. People like Bill Akers in his young days. I immediately formed, because I toured America before, you see, with Sadler's Wells, so I formed the Diners Club. I knew every place we went to, where to go to eat. Chicago, the German restaurant there, and so on and so forth.
That would have pleased Bill Akers a lot.
Yeah, and we had an absolutely wonderful time. And when the bomb went up in London, when we lost our artistic director, I thought, God, I'm not going to stay. And Australia offered me a job. So I came out here and I joined the Australian Ballet as their music director, and I had 6 very happy years with them. I only left them because I was offered a better job actually in America. But while I was in Australia, one of the many projects that I was engaged in was arranging the music of The Merry Widow for a ballet.
Ah, right. That's where that Merry Widow came
and
in.
It was a real sensation. That first night at the, I'm sorry to do a commercial about it, but that first night at the Palais Theatre St Kilda, not far from where I live now, that first night will never be forgotten. The place was torn apart. God, they loved it. And it's been a huge success ever since. It's done all over the world, and it was fun to do because it's such wonderful music.
Oh, it's wonderful music, and if the company was and is a great company to be
Indeed.
Associated with. So
yes,
it was
it's coming right up again, believe you me.
Is it?
Oh, it's having a wonderful time. It's got a great new artistic director, and I'm so thrilled they're going to do one of my ballets in their next program. They're doing The Sentimental Bloke.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's your music,
Yes,
is it?
I should have brought the record along, but I forgot. Sorry.
Next time, perhaps.
Next time.
Absolutely. So here you are in your Australia, and you're very happy, but you did go back then after a while.
Well, I went to America next for a couple of years, and then something else had happened. You see, everywhere I was, every company I was in, after a time. And I've worked this out because I'm now writing my life story, and I've seen how this has fallen into place. After a time, a wonderful artistic director gets sacked. Peggy Van Prague was sacked in 1954 from the Sadler's Wells Theatre Ballet, and then I moved to Covent Garden. We lost Sir Frederick Ashton. That was a terrible blow. And then in Australia, I thought Bobby Helpman was a wonderful artistic director. He was sacked by the board. And then I was offered a job with American Ballet Theatre, and their marvellous 2 directors were eventually sacked. And I thought to myself, this is going to be heartache all the time. Maybe it's time I went back to being freelance. So I'd last been freelance in, oh dear me, 1900 and frozen to death, 1951.
And this was now?
And it's now 1980, getting on to 1981. So after 30 years of earning a salary, knowing where my salary was every year, I went freelance again. And I've been freelance for the last 20 years of my life.
Oh, really?
From 1980 until now, except that I'm retired now, yes.
Oh, well, for goodness sakes. Now, we've got some more music. It's Evil Under the Sun.
Right. One of the many things I did, because I cast my net far and wide, and I had been approached to write the music for a film called Tales of Beatrix Potter. And this was great fun to do. And the film company that made it, approached me a few years later. They were making a series of films of the Poirot stories of Agatha Christie.
Yes.
And they were going to do one called Evil Under the Sun, where a very successful lady film star who's a bitch is murdered, played by Diana Rigg, I may say. And they thought that they wanted music very redolent of the 30s, and I suggested Cole Porter, and they jumped at the chance. So I arranged a lot of the wonderful Cole Porter melodies for this film. And actually, this is the opening title of it.
Well, that ended suddenly, didn't it? You said it would.
Well, it is a piece of film music, yes.
Right.
And of course it cuts out, doesn't it? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, did you do more music for films?
Yes, I've done quite a lot of films, and some of them a long time ago when they were not very good films, but they were fun to do.
Like?
Yes, and...
Can you remember any names?
Oh dear. Well, my favourite was one because it had Boris Karloff in it, and that was called, oh dear me, he played, Colonel March Investigates. Yeah, they were all cops and robbers movies.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so they were, it was very good for me because at a time in my life I was given an orchestra of something like 25 players, and I had to try and make it sound like an orchestra of 50. And that's very good practice.
Isn't
good
it?
practice.
Yes.
I've loved orchestrating, I've always been very happy with a pen, very happy writing music, and that was my first love, and I guess it's really my last love too.
Well, it's something you can go on and on and on doing, can't you?
Yes,
I mean,
indeed.
but there's no limit. to
No.
how much you can write, only given your energy, strength and time.
Yes, and and another record that I brought along, but maybe you'll have to listen to this if I'm here another time, is of a ballet that I wrote actually 2 years ago. I was approached by the National Youth Ballet of Great Britain. They wanted to turn the story of Toad Hall into a ballet, and they wanted me to compose it. So I do actually have a CD of that composition, and it was an enormous success, although I say it as shouldn't. I've never conducted the ballet. I did an excerpt from it at the Royal Albert Hall last year with the kids, and this is a young company of young hopefuls who are good enough eventually to go into the famous ballet companies of Britain. And so let's play that next time.
Well, you're, of course, invited to come back.
Well, I was rather hoping I was.
We would love to have you back, Golden Days Radio, and just as soon as we can arrange it, that would be lovely. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Christine.
coming in.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Interludes with Chris Mackenzie.